One of the most devastating effects of narcissistic abuse is how it quietly dismantles your trust in yourself. You start the relationship believing your perceptions, your instincts, your emotions, but over time, the narcissist trains you to obey every single one of them. At first, it seems harmless. They help you make decisions. They advise you on what's best. They correct your memory when something doesn't line up with theirs. But soon that help turns into control. Their voice becomes louder than yours, not just in the relationship, but in your head. Before long, you stop checking in with yourself entirely. You defer to them on everything. What's right, what's wrong, who's trustworthy, what actually happened, and even what you're allowed to feel. And the paradox? You trust them completely, yet you no longer trust yourself at all. And this happens because the narcissist systematically conditions you to depend on them for your reality. They gaslight you into believing that your thoughts are unreliable, your emotions are dramatic, your memory is flawed, and your instincts are crazy. So every time that you start to think for yourself, self-doubt creeps in and you hand the power back over to them. And eventually, your inner voice becomes silent. You seek their approval to feel safe, and you second guess everything that comes from within you. That's why so many survivors describe it as feeling like they lost themselves. But what was really lost wasn't your identity, it was your trust in your own inner compass. It's not that you didn't know the answers, it's that you were trained to believe that you couldn't be trusted with them. That's what narcissistic conditioning does. It teaches you to outsource your truth. You start deferring to someone else for permission to think, to feel, to exist. And when you live like that long enough, you forget how to hear yourself. You question every instinct. You rehearse your words before you speak. Can anyone relate to that one? Leave a comment in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. You filter your emotions through what they might approve of. And after a while, your own internal voice doesn't even sound like you anymore. It sounds like them. And that's the thing that people don't realize. The narcissist doesn't just want control over your actions. They want control over your interpretation of reality. Because once they own that, they own you. They don't need to cage you. They just need to convince you that the door was never open in the first place. And when I say that they just don't need to convince you that the door was never open, I meant that a narcissist's control isn't maintained by physical force, it's psychological. They don't need to lock you in a cage. They just need to make you believe that there's no way out. So even though you technically could walk, question them, or think for yourself, you don't. Because they've trained you to doubt your right or ability to do so. And here's how that works in practice. The psychological cage. They gaslight you until you no longer trust your own perception. They rewrite events so often that you begin to believe your memory is unreliable. They tell you that you're overreacting, dramatic, or crazy until you second guess your every emotion. They isolate you subtly, convincing you that other people don't understand you or that everyone else is against the relationship. They'll tell you that the world has gone bust and the war is coming and famine is coming and we need to stick to the tribe, they being the tribe. They'll tell you that prices are so high now and they're going to continue to get worse that no one else will be able to survive alone. And while there's some truth to some of this, I mean, the violence is there. We're seeing it in real life. But what they're doing here is taking a real situation and amplifying it to further traumatize you, or rather to further paralyze you. But the thing is that we could be another 5 years before a full-blown war starts, or it could stop altogether. And the economy, yes, it sucks right now, but you don't know if it'll stay that way. I mean, how many times have we been through economy collapses of sorts and got out of it? Now, others will use the triggers from childhood traumas like No one will ever want you. You aren't smart enough to figure it out. And your conscious mind wants to tell them to go to hell, but the subconscious mind is heavily conditioned even if you don't see it. I too thought I wasn't buying into his BS, but somehow I was. Because over time, these tactics, they don't just control your choices, they control your sense of what choices even exist. That's the door. You had a way out. You had your own agency, but they needed you to believe that you didn't. So they shape your mind around the illusion that you're incapable, powerless, too broken, or too dependent to survive without them. And once you believe that, once they've convinced you that the door was never open, you don't even try to leave. You don't question the rules. Instead, you police yourself. You watch every word you speak, every thought you think. That's the genius and the horror of psychological abuse. The victim's cage isn't made of bars. It's built from self-doubt, fear, and conditioning. You think that you're staying because you want to, when in reality, you've been taught to believe that leaving isn't even possible. Let me show you what that looks like. There was someone, a client, let's call her Anna for privacy purposes. When she first met her partner, she was independent, she was funny, she was sharp, she made her own choices, had her own opinions, and trusted her instincts. At first, he loved that about her. He said things like, "You're so grounded, you always know what to do." He made her feel seen, like her strength was what made her special. But slowly over time, that began to shift. It was little corrections slipped into their conversations. "Honey, you dropped a pin on the floor. I almost stepped on it." Things like that made her feel off balance and self-conscious. He'd use small criticism disguised as concern. "You sure that's a good idea?" Or if she had some bad day at the office or something, he'd say things like, "You're too emotional right now. Let me just handle it." And at first, it didn't feel like control. It felt like care. He said he just wanted to help after all, right? They love to use that word. "I just want to help." And she believed him because he used to make her feel really safe. So she let him make more decisions. She asked for his advice, and not always because she couldn't think for herself at first, but she noticed that he always felt better when she did. She wanted him to feel important. And a lot of us women are conditioned to believe that the man is head of the household and he makes the decisions, he leads, he decides, he knows best, he drives the car, he fixes things, he handles it. And we tell ourselves it's just the natural order, that we're being respectful, cooperative, feminine. But slowly that respect, it starts to blur into obedience. And we stop noticing how often that we shrink so that he can stand taller. At first it's subtle. You start letting him decide where to go, what to buy, how to spend. You let him speak for both of you. You stop correcting him when he gets the story wrong, because it's easier that way. And soon you find yourself asking for permission in situations where you never used to ask at all. And you tell yourself it's partnership, it's compromise. But deep down, it feels more like disappearing. And this dynamic I'm talking about here is not limited to women. Men can also be conditioned from a young age to defer their judgment or desires to certain authority figures, often their mothers. And this can carry into adulthood in relationships or life decisions. The mechanism is familiar, though culturally, it often looks different, because many boys, they grow up in households where mothers are the emotional gatekeepers. Be good. Don't upset your mother. Think about how she'll feel. And over time, boys internalize the pattern. My needs and opinions are secondary to hers. Validation through obedience. Boys often learn that their value is tied to pleasing the mother. Doing what she wants equals love, approval, acceptance. Doing what they want equals guilt, shame, or disapproval. Anyway, I sidetracked here. Let me get back to my story. She started to check with him before saying yes or no to things. And every time she did, he rewarded her with calm, with affection, with the old version of himself that she'd been missing. But if she disagreed, even kindly, the warmth would vanish. He'd go cold, distant, punishing. He would barely talk to her for days, just ignored her. She'd make dinner and he'd eat without conversation and then walk away to the garage for the night tinkering on stuff. So she learned, go along and you keep the peace. Speak up and you lose him. And after some time, she couldn't tell whether her opinions ended and his began. If someone asked her what she wanted, she'd pause, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she was waiting for his reaction. Does that sound familiar? And that's when the door disappears. Not physically, but psychologically. She could leave, she could walk out any time, but in her mind, she couldn't, because he'd made her believe that she couldn't survive on her own. And that's how it happens. You don't wake up one day and lose yourself all at once. You get there slowly by trusting the wrong voice more than your own, by mistaking control for protection, and by believing that silence is safety. And as for Anna, days turned into months, and by then she no longer questioned his rules. She questioned herself. If she forgot something, it was her fault. If he got angry, she'd replay the moment in her head until she found what she must have done wrong, or how she could fix things so that they'd return back to normal. By then, he had gained so much control over her that he never had to raise his voice anymore. Just a sigh, a look, or that subtle withdrawal of affection was enough to pull her back in line. She stopped talking to her friends about him, because every time she tried, she'd end up defending him. And deep down, she knew how that sounded. So she said less, and she shrank a little bit more. But luckily, she did end up waking up to all of this and leaving. She started getting more moments of clarity that things weren't right. She told me that a day came when he gaslit her and told her that she had imagined something, yet there she was in front of him with proof in hand. And it was small, almost nothing. But it didn't sit right with her. And that night she couldn't sleep, not because of the message, but because of the question that it left behind. Why would he lie about something so small? And that question was dangerous, not to him, but to the story that she'd been living. Because once you start asking why, you start noticing the pattern, the inconsistencies, the little rewrites of reality that never add up. And that's when the fog, it starts to lift. Or it starts to thin a bit anyway. She left the relationship not long after, and she did continue working on herself, where today she's actually about to marry a man who has proven to her over the years that he can be counted on and is really there for her. She's happy. As for us, at one point, we'll stop saying things like they're just stressed or tired and call it what it really is, manipulation, aka abuse. Victims of abuse often push these thoughts away. It's all part of survival mode. It's what the mind does to protect you from a truth that you're not ready to face. So don't judge yourself here. But in this survival mode, our rational minds say things like, it's not that bad, or I'm just too sensitive. And that's where so many people get stuck, half awake and half asleep, feeling the cracks form, but still clinging to the illusion. Because believing the lie, it still feels safer than living without it. Until it no longer suffices. You'll get there. And that's the thing about this kind of control. It doesn't always end with a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it ends quietly. Not with a fight, but with a thought that you can no longer unthink. A single moment where something small doesn't make sense anymore. Where you hear your own voice for the first time in a long time. Maybe hesitant and shaky, but still there. And that's where the picture that they built in your mind, it stops lining up with what you're seeing. Because once you see it, even for a second, you cannot fully unsee it. You might go back to pretending for a while, telling yourself it's fine, it's just a bad phase, he's just tired. But something inside of you has already shifted. You now notice things that you used to explain away. You hesitate before you believe them. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you start to wonder what's real and what's been rewritten. That's where most people are when they find videos like this. Not free yet, maybe. Not even ready to be. You're finding yourself standing at the edge of awareness, one hand still on the door, still not realizing just yet that it was open all along. You'll get there. I know you will. And I know because that's how it starts with most victims of abuse. So keep watching videos like this, and they don't have to just be mine here. These videos over time, what they do is they rewire your brain to empowering thoughts where the healing starts to happen. So that is all for today, and hopefully we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.